See, last week because we have a guest speaker, right? You still remember Martha, right? she gave us a very nice talk about time series, right? So because of the guest speaker, our class time is kind of squeezed, so we don't really have covered its Dplyr package very well, right? So this week I will like start with I cannot go over everything, right? But I will try to like review the most important things of Dplyr in the beginning, and then this week we will go for ggplot2, right? Now, Dplyr is a data frame manipulation, so it's kind of doing data manipulation, data processing, right? And ggplot2 is kind of like data frame visualization, like draw pictures, right? So nowadays the data exploration is very depend on the visualization. As we go through this today's class, you will see the power of visualization, right, in exploring your data. Okay. Actually, I already give you the Tafan data set, right, which is a retail point of sales data, right? And after learning today's visualization, this week's team assignment, I would like you to apply the ggplot technique on that data set, right? And this is actually preparing for our next 2 weeks. Our next 2 weeks we will learn some more data exploration technique. But before that, I would say that nowadays the most important data exploration technique is visualization. So you would ask, what do you mean by exploration? Right? Okay, data exploration is kind of like you get the data, right? And you want to look into the data and try to have a holistic, systematic overview of that data, right? You want to see if there are some phenomena, some trend, some structure within the data, right? But before exploration, you don't know what you are looking for. This is a thing that very different from the other kind of analysis technique, right? If we are doing model, we know what we are looking for, right? As what we have done in the old faith data case, we are doing a model, and we know that our objective is to use the model to predict probability, right? To estimate probability. We have a specific purpose. Most of the data analysis technique, they have a specific purpose. But for exploration, we don't really have we don't know what we are looking for until we look at it, right? So this is a kind of like creativity is also very important. It's not just technology, right? Domain knowledge, creativity, and also visualization technique. You will use basically these three types of technique to do the data exploration. And let me say it again, before you explore, you don't really know what you are looking for, right? You explore and you see some interesting, some meaningful, some impactful insight, right? And you dig in, right? One step after the other, right? That is what we mean by exploration. You don't know what you are looking for, but we do have some way to get you started, right? We have some way to get you started by visualizing the data. You were like find some insight in the data. That's what we mean by exploration, in short. Okay. Okay, so before we go into GG Part 2, let's do some review on the Dplyr, yeah, because of the shortened course last week. Now, Dplyr is for data frame manipulation, right? So we have to start with the basic structure of a data frame, right? Now, I have told you like 20 times already, right? Data frame is the most common, most useful data structure in data analysis. The reason that it is useful is because the structure actually reflect the relationship between information and our subject of analysis, right? As I say, this structure actually reflects the relationship between subject, right? Every role is actually one of our research subject, one of our unit of analysis, right? It could be a company, it could be a customer, it could be whatever you want to investigate. Now, if you want to investigate something, you want to investigate the attribute of that something, right? You want to investigate customer. You want to know this customer's frequency of buying. You want to know his the average buying amount, right? You want to know how long has had this customer buy from us, right? You want to know what is the last time that this customer come to us, right? Is this customer come to our website? How many times does he visit our website? How many page? What page did he see, right? All of this attribute attached to that customer, attached to that the subject that we want to investigate, isn't it, right? And that attribute actually was recorded in each of this column, right? Okay, so in this structure, we use it to analyze whatever we want to analyze, right? On the attribute that interests us, right? So that is the beauty of data frame. So most of the data analysis will start with the data frame, data structure. Okay. And Dplyr, this package, it actually provides us a set of functions to process the data frame. Okay. It is actually a collection of functions to process the data frame. Okay. So the four most important verbs is filter, which means that you can filter the data frame. It means that you select the role, right, with some condition, isn't it, right? You select the role by condition. That is what filter do, right? So after doing filter, you still have a data frame, but the data frame will be shorter because only the role that match, that fit the condition remains in the outcome. Okay, right? So this is filter. And the other thing is select. You select the columns, right? Usually you select the column by name, right? Okay, so you after select, you have like narrower. You have a narrower data frame, right? Only the frame you select will remains in the outcome data frame, right? Now you will say that actually we can do this simply by indexing, isn't it? Right? This is basically exactly the same as what we are using indexing, isn't it? Right? But indexing is like kind of like a mathematical notation, isn't it? You use angle basket, you use a comma to separate the row index and the column index, right? And the syntax is very easy to make mistake, right? It's not intuitive, not as intuitive as Dplyr does, right? Okay, so this is one benefit of Dplyr is it actually is quite similar to human language, right? So you filter your subject, right? You select the column of your interest, isn't it? Right? Okay. And after filter, after select, the outcome is still a data frame, right? That is the third important thing in Dplyr. Now, in Dplyr, the outcome is always a data frame, right? Okay. So if you put the outcome of the first Dplyr operation, you can actually put you can use the outcome as the input of the second Dplyr operation, right? So in this way, you can chain with the pipe operator. You can make the chain of data process, right? You can do the data assembly line, right, by a sequence of data processing, isn't it? Right? So that is the beauty of Dplyr. Okay. Actually, if you write program in Dplyr, it tends to be longer than you using index, but it will be easier to read, right? It will be easier to read, easier to use, and not easy to make mistake, right? Okay. Now, beyond these two basic verbs, we have the third verb called mutate. Do you still remember what mutate does? Anyone? Yes.
We assign the new column.
Say it.
We would like to assign a new column.
Right, you create. It called mutate, right? You create a new columns, right? Okay. So you create a new column. But how can we create a new column? We create the new column with expression, right? This is the column name, right? The pin number, the pin words. These are the new column that we create, and we create this new columns by expression, making out of the existing columns, right? So it's mutate. You kind of put the existing column in the expression, right? Expression do the calculation. Usually this expression is the vector expression, which means that after the calculation, after you x1 plus x2 plus x3, it's actually still a vector, right? Okay, so when using mutate, you need to remember that the expression on the right hand side of the equal sign has to be a vector, right? Has to be a vector of the same length with the data frame itself, right? It would naturally of the same length, because if you are using the other columns, right, to do the calculation, right? Now at the end the result will be a vector of the same length, isn't it? Right? So this is mutate. You use the expression composing. You use the expression to compute the existing column in order to create a new columns, right? Okay, so this is mutate. We mutate columns with expression, and well, actually you can create a new column simply by the $sign operator, isn't it? Right? You can, but the beauty of Dplyr is actually you can mutate a lot of columns at once, right? Okay, so you actually in one mutate function call, you can create like 10 or 8 new columns at once, right? So make it easier, make it a lot easier to read and write, isn't it? Okay, so this is mutate. Within the mutate, you define a series of new columns with the expression making out of the existing columns, right? That is mutate. And the last important verb in Dplyr is actually summarize. Okay? And as suggested by its name, the summarize is to do summary, right? Is to do summary on the existing column, right? Now, usually the summarize will be used with the group by, right? Okay. Actually, you don't need to always use group by. If you do not use group by, the summary will be the summary of the entire data frame, right? If I do not use this group by, then the AVG would be the average of the entire N, right? Okay. If I do not use group by, then the summarize would actually summarize the entire data frame, right? Okay. But if I use group by, then the summary would you would do a summary on every group. Okay. So if I say group by year, so and these two things will be grouped together. This three things will be grouped together, and these four things will be grouped together, right? So it's kind of like a summarize by group type of ideal, isn't it? Right? Now you will say that we can also do this by Dplyr, right? We do have a shorter comment called Dplyr, but when you use Dplyr, you can only do one summary at a time, and the result would be a vector, right? Okay, and then if you want to make a data frame, you would need to put them into a data frame, right? But in Dplyr, you don't need to do that, right? After you declare the group and do a summarize, you can actually summarize a lot of variables at a time, right? Okay. Now, after summarize, the length of the data frame would equal to the number of groups. Okay? Let me say it again. After summarize, because every group is summarized into a row, isn't it? Every group is summarized into a row. Now, and the length of the row actually depends on how many variables you put into this summarize function call, right? In this function call, I create 3 summary variable, right? Average, maximum, minimum, right? So every row actually have average, maximum, summary. And this is the average, maximum, summary of 2000, right? And this is the average, maximum, minimum of 2005. And that is for 2015, right? So after group by summarize, every group will be summarized into a row, right? So the length of the data frame would be shortened and equal to the number of groups. Okay? Okay. Unlike mutate, right? Mutate, after you do a mutate, every new column is of the same length as the original data frame, right? But for group by summary, you actually shorten the data frame, right? So you get a point, right? This is the 4 basic verbs. Actually quite intuitive, isn't it? You just need time to get used to it. And you will find that it is easier to use this when you are doing a complicated data processing. For example, if you have followed our group assignment last week, right? You will see that I use a lot of Dplyr to process the point of sales data, right? The reason that I use Dplyr is because when we aggregate the item into order, when I aggregate the order into customer, right? I need to create a lot of new variables at a time, isn't it? For every customer, I need to know how long has he buy from us. What is the last time he buy from us, right? I want to know the the frequency that he buy from us. I want to know its average buying amount, right? I also want to know the profit contribution, the revenue contribution that this customer bring to us, isn't it? I want to know a lot of things about this customer, right? So when I do the group by summary, I will kind of summarize a lot of variable that of our interest about this customer, right? And usually this is the way that we do business analytics, right? In business analytics, what are we analyzing? We are analyzing a company, we are analyzing a product, we are analyzing a customer, we are analyzing a competitor, right? So we are analyzing an employee, actually. Sometimes the human resource department will do that, right? So when you do this, for each of this subject, you will have a lot of records, and you will need to process the record, right? Aggregate the record, and then to create a lot of new variable about this subject of analysis, okay? And that's why we would like to introduce Dplyr, because it would make it a lot easier, right? And as I has mentioned, the input and output of all of the Dplyr function is data frame, right? Let me say it again. The input and output of every Dplyr functions are data frame. It's always data frame. Input is data frame, output is data frame, right? So you basically can change, you basically can build a data pipeline, right? And you put the input and then process the input step by step to get your output, right? And the intermittent process could be very complicated. But as long as you get used to the verb of Dplyr, the data manipulation will get a lot easier, right? That's the point of Dplyr, right? And you would get a lot of practice when you are using the Tafang database, the Tafang data set, okay? So any question about this page? Okay. Now the second page that I would like to highlight to you is this group by operation, right? We already explained one of the group by operation is group by and summary, right? Group by and summary. Usually you want to, in the Tafang case, cite the Tafang case as an example, you want to aggregate the item into order, right? You want to aggregate order into customer, isn't it, right? So it's quite nature to do the group by summary, right? So group by summary usually do not have problem, okay? But sometimes you will have to do group by and mutate, okay? Now what is the idea of group by and mutate? You do group by and mutate, which means that the mutate was done group by group, okay? Okay. After you put a group by on something, right? The data frame is actually have a structure of group, okay? This is the data frame, right? And then after I group this data frame by year, it is kind of like, it is no longer one data frame. It is a group of data frame, kind of like that, right? So if you do mutate after a group by, the mutate will be done group by group, okay? The mutate will be done group by group, okay? Now, why do you want to do mutate group by group? Well, in the beginning, it would sound strange, right? For example, if I want to do this, like total equal to x1 plus x2 plus x3, okay? I don't need to do it group by group, right? So I do it group by group, the result would be exactly the same as I do it like the entire data frame, isn't it? Right? So actually, this pure vector operation, if you just apply a lock, if you just like do a mathematical operation on the existing columns, you don't need to do it by group, right? Because the result will be exactly the same as you do it like the entire data frame, and it will be a lot faster actually. Okay. For example, if you are doing the Tafang data set, they are like 3,000 customer, sorry, 30,000 customer, if I remember it right. Okay. So if you group by customer and then do mutate, the mutate has to be done like 30,000 times. Okay, it will slow down the computation a lot, but the result will be exactly the same as you do it just once. Okay, in R, doing vector operation is very fast. Okay, but the problem is if you do the vector operation by group, that operation will have to like iterate. You'll have to repeat like 30,000 times, and for nothing, right? So it makes no sense. Okay, if you want to mutate a new column, and the column can be expressed by vector operations, there's no point to mutate it by group. Okay, but group mutate is useful in two different scenario. Okay, this is the thing that I would like to explain to you. You will use and these two scenarios are very useful. Okay, now the first scenario is in the expression, right? When you mutate this new column, if you use summary function, for example, like this, I mutate a new column called fraction, right? And fraction is defined by n divided by sum of n, right? Okay. So when I do these things group by group, the sum of n is actually the sum of year 2000, right? And this is the sum of 2005. And here is the sum of 2015, right? Okay. This is one of the reasons, actually the major reason, that you want to do group mutate. Okay? Right? When you mutate a column, if the column has to use the group summary, right? For example, if you want to like translate this n into from the count into a fraction, into a proportion, right? You have to do things like this, right? And these things has to be done year after year, right? If I do it like entire vector, the sum of n will be the sum of everything, right? It's no longer the annual fraction, right? It will become an old-time fraction. You see the difference? Okay? So this is one of the scenarios that you have to do group mutate. Okay? If on the right-hand side of the equal sign, you have some summary function there, right? The summary function will apply to the group. Okay? So you have the group summary, and actually the group summary will be different group by group. This is one of the reasons that you will have to do group mutate. Okay? You get me? Okay? Now, and the second scenario that you need to do group mutate is there's a function type called window functions. Okay? And this type of function used to usually they are used in calculating the growth rate, the annual difference, things like that, right? There's a window function called lag, which means that you will like shift, you will shift the vector in one position, okay? So if I do a lag, right? Well, actually, I will lag the if I lag the n and then minus with n, right? This is not a good example. I should do it like this. A better example should be things like let me pull it longer, sorry. So if I want to create a column called delta, right? And I want to calculate kind of like a growth rate, things like that, right? Okay, so I can like I can do a lag and I shift n by one position, and then I do a minus, right? So I can see the difference between, right, between the lag, and that has to be done group by group, right? Okay. This data set is not a very it's not it's not good enough for explaining this idea. Do you still remember the example of like the baby names? You remember the example of baby names, right? So if I group by baby names, and then I do this, right? I do the n minus lag n, then I can see actually the delta, right? The difference, or actually the growth, right? Of every baby names, right? And that baby name cannot, they cannot do this a close name, right? They need to do it within the baby names, right? Let's take a look at it, and you will see how it works, okay? Okay, this is the baby's names data set, right? So B is the baby's name, right? So first of all, I group by sex and group by name, right? Okay, so every sex, every name. And then I arrange by year, okay? So imagine how the data frame is prepared, right? It's grouped by name, and then within the name, I arrange by year, okay? And that is what I do. See? I do prop minus lag prop. So I want to know the increment of prop in percentage, right? In this way, right? Okay. In business analytic, from time to time we want to capture the growth rate, things like that, right? And when you calculating growth rate, you will have to use Windows function. Combine the window function, put the Windows function inside of a group mutate. Okay, so that is the second scenario that you need to use group mutate. You get me? Okay, and this is the way that you use it. Okay. So I think from this time on, you will use Dplyr again, and again, right? And you will learn more and more about Dplyr, right? Besides this basic verb, there are a lot of some special features to make it easier, to make programming easier in the Dplyr package. Okay. For now, I believe that this 2-page is good enough for you to get a run of Dplyr, right? Okay. Remember the 4 verb. Okay. This 4 verb function is important. And the second thing is use loop operation wisely, right? Group summarize is very natural, but group mutate, you need to take spatial attention. Okay? Otherwise, you will like kind of make mistake. Okay? So this is what I want to say about Dplyr today. Do you have any question about Dplyr? Yes.
When we have to do ungroup.
When you have.
When we have to do ungroup function.
Yeah, when you have 2 group variable, right? So what is the question? When we have 2 group variable.
To do
Ungroup? Oh, okay. See, the reason that you want to use ungroup is you want to remove the group structure, right? Sometimes you will have several group variable inside the group by, right? For example, in the Tafang data set, you might want to group by item, group by product ID, and then group by order ID, and then group by customer ID, right? It's kind of like hierarchical structure, right? So if you have many group by variable inside the group by, after doing one summary, it will remove the last group variable, and the remaining group variables will still be there, right? And sometimes you don't want it, right? If you do not want the remaining group variables, you can remove it, right? With the ungroup function. Okay. For example, if we in this here we have 2 group by. We have 2 group by, right? And then we arrange. Arrange will not change the group structure. So up to this point, we still have 2 group variable. Mutate would not change the group structure. Okay? So when you go to this point, it still have group structure, right? So and arrange again would not change group structure. So after this pipe, the outcome is still grouped by sex and name. Okay? After this pipe, the outcome is still grouped by sex and name, right? Suppose you want to mutate something out of this data frame, right? And you don't want the group. You can put the ungroup here, right? And then you will remove the group structure, okay? So if you do not want the group structure, you remove it.
So if we don't remove it, and we like kind of put another code, it will come to that group.
That you need to be careful though. Okay, some operation are the same with group and without group. For example, mutate, right? If you do a vector mutate, if you do a mutate like this, right, that group will not affect you at all, right? But it would be calculated slower, okay? But if you do this type of mutate, group is important, right? If you do this type of mutate, group is important, isn't it? Right? or if you do a summary, group is important, isn't it? Okay, because summary and summarize and mutate, they depends on the group structure. Okay, so if you have undesirable group structure in the outcome of your data pipeline, you have to remove it before doing subsequent operation. Otherwise, it will be affected. Okay. Well, one of the things that I did not mention is actually after doing one summary, it will remove one group structure. Okay. But only one. Okay. If you have like 3 groups variable, if you group by 3 group variable, after each summarize, the last group variable will be removed, because after summary, the last group will be summarized into one row, right? So the last group variable is no longer needed, right? So, but the rest of the group variable will still be there, okay? You need to remember this rule, otherwise you might make mistake when doing group summary and group mutate. Let me try to write here. Maybe I do it here. Will be easier for me. Okay. So if you a data frame called D, and then you say G1, G2, and G3. And you do a summarize. Okay? So after this summarize, G3 will be removed. Okay? The outcome of this comment would only have G1 and G2 group. The group of G3 is removed. Okay? The reason that you remove the G3 is actually because every G3 is already been grouped into one column, right? So that G3 structure is no longer needed, right? But the G2 and G1 is not, right? Okay? For example, if G3 is the item, G2 is the order, and G1 is the customer, thing like that, right? So after summarize, every item is already been aggregated, consolidated into one row, right? So that group structure is no longer needed. But you still need the order, right? The order still have a lot of item, right? The customer will still have a lot of orders, isn't it? Okay? So when you have group by, and you group it by many variable, the summarize would only remove the very last group by. Okay? And after this summarize, the outcome will still be grouped by G1 and G2, right? Okay? And if for some reason you don't need it, right, then you have to do ungroup. Okay? After the ungroup, the group structure of G1 and G2 will be removed. Okay? You get me? Okay. It will take some time to get used to this type of things. if this is the first time that you heard of this, you would feel confused, and that's nature. That's normal, okay? When you actually processing data, you will get into this. You will get into this type of scenario, and then you would understand how to use it. Okay.
If I don't use the group by and I use the summary, it will sum all of the
Right. If I do not use glue by, right? The summary would summary the entire data frame.
So it will show only the row of the summary of all columns.
Right. Right. If you do not have glue and you do summarize, okay? If you do not have glue and you do summarize, the outcome would has only one row.
But it shows every
Uh, the column would depends on how you define the column inside summarize, isn't it? Right? Okay. So you define the column inside of summarize, and then if you do it without glue, the entire data frame will be summarized into a single row. Okay? Any more questions? So do it. Do more practice, and then you will get questions. Okay? And that's how the TA session works, right? Okay, as I say, it's very difficult to teach programming, because programming is like riding bicycle, right? I cannot teach you how to ride a bicycle. You need to ride it by yourself. Okay? I can only tell you some principle and give you the example for you to practice. Okay? Now, this is for Dplyr. Okay? Try to like make up what we have left of last week. Now this is 10 o'clock. Let's take a 10 minutes break, and then we'll be back in 10 after 10.